We're certainly entering the period of time leading up to Pesach. I think it's in the air. And significantly, this Shabbat, in addition to reading Parshat Tazria, which has to do with laws of purity and impurity, and specifically the laws of Tzara'at, commonly translated as leprosy, but it really is a spiritual affliction. We read an edition of HaChodesh Hazel Lochem, which is a commandment given to the Jewish people prior to the exodus of Egypt, that we should begin counting the months of the year. And we do so beginning with month number 1, which biblically is not when Rosh Hashanah falls, even though that's when we change our calendar years in Hebrew. But it begins with Chodesh Nisan, with the beginning of the springtime in the month of Nisan. So we have this Shabbat coming is an interesting combination. It's reading about the affliction of tsaras, which comes about primarily through negative speech. It's a spiritual affliction with a physical manifestation, so we don't know of it today. People relate it to leprosy because I guess some of the similarities of symptoms. But we see here the power of speech just as we're getting ready to enter the month of Nisan. And the big mitzvah, the big occasion we're looking ahead to is the Seder, and the opportunity for us to speak and give over to the next generation our experience of going out of Egypt, Yetziat Mitzrayim. And indeed, our goal is very, very lofty. The goal the Haggadah sets out for us, and Maimonides codifies as the goal of the Seder, is for each one of us, and we take our children along for the ride, to see ourselves as if we have exited Egypt. Ki'uhu atzmo yotza miMitzrayim. We have to not reenact something, but reawaken within us to the experience, and in a sense, evoke the feeling as if we had just left Egypt. And we do that through speech, through telling the story, through the mitzvah of the Torah of V'higata Torah Vincha, which we codify into a Haggadah, into the story that we're going to tell our children. And in the coming weeks, we're going to look more at the way we tell that story. But tonight, I want to use the Parsha of Tazria and its lessons about speech as an introduction. And then I want us to consider together an arc again, an arc of getting ourselves from here, where we sit at this moment today, into the frame of mind so that on the night of April 15th, before the clock strikes 12, we not only will have paid our income taxes, but we will have brought ourselves to a point of feeling emotionally the elation and the aggrandizement and the specialness as having been redeemed from Egypt, just as our ancestors experienced it 3,300 and so many years ago. So that's what we're aiming for. So we're going to start ourselves on that journey tonight. And we're going to start by looking at Parshat Tazria. If you have a stone chumash handy, we're going to look at page 611. But we're just going to make some cursory references here because it's very difficult to decipher this Torah portion because of the technicalities of the manifestation of tsaras. But let's just start with a touch point. The touch point is this. There's a medrash, and the medrash goes as follows. The first temple was destroyed, a shocking, shocking moment. It's sort of the bookend to us going out of Egypt, arriving at the land of Israel under the leadership of Joshua, conquering the land, going through the period of time of the judges and the prophets and the initial kings, building the temple in the time of Shlomo HaMelech, and then reaching a point where the temple was destroyed. And Abraham, his soul enters the world. He's standing amongst the ruins of the temple, and he looks up to God and says, God, how could this have happened? And his response is twofold. First of all, your children worshiped idols. They forsook God. And second of all, and listen to what the Medrash highlights, they were glad at the misfortune of their neighbors. They lived their lives in a way where for them to feel up, they had to feel that someone else was diminished. A terrible, terrible way of living, and a way of living which is completely contradictory to living in relation to God and living in relation to the sense that I am the receptor. I receive so much kindness and love and potential to act and to grow from God that animates me. But we know when a person has none of that animation within them, when a person finds themselves despondent or lost or lacking in meaning, so what happens to the person? So the person still wants to grow. But the shortcut to growing, of course, is I'm here, but if I push you down to there, then I feel taller. I feel as though I've grown. And this is the dynamic that animates the Parsha of Tazria, because the Jewish people begin living in this holy environment a year after they leave Egypt at the Exodus. We're moving to the Parsha now. The setting is that Moshe is leading the Jewish people. They built a Mishkan, a facility which houses God's presence. They're living all around it. Should be idyllic, should be like Garden of Eden-esque, even though they're in an abandoned place, because God's providing everything they need, just like God did in the Garden of Eden, just like God really does on so many dimensions to us, but we're not so ready to notice it. So the people are here and they're warned. When you become frustrated that you don't see yourself growing, and you turn to your neighbor and decide that I'm going to talk badly about him or her, I'm going to denigrate him or her, I'm going to reduce them in my own eyes, and hopefully in the eyes of others as I repeat these ideas, that's going to become my ersatz form of growth. Something shocking is going to happen, and you're going to develop on your skin, first on your house, on your clothes, but ultimately on your own skin, a sign that God is very displeased with you. And that sign is called saras. And if you in fact have it, a Kohen is going to inspect you, and those are the details that are hard to read and navigate in this 13th chapter of the book of Vayikra. And the Kohen is going to declare you impure. You have to leave the camp. You have to be isolated. A shocking moment. You have to move out of your house. You live outside the camp, but not only do you live outside the camp, but if there are other people in similar circumstances for you, you can't even associate with them. It's time alone. It's really a time out. It's a time to think about, let me restart my engines of growth on a personal level so that I become less attentive to putting down other people around me. And then after 7 days of this, the Kohen is going to re-inspect you. Now, interestingly here, and it's really on page 611, it's sentence 5. It's really hard to navigate these words, but I'll read it to you. The Kohen shall look at it on the 7th day, and behold, page 611 in the Art Scroll, the affliction retains its color, and the affliction did not spread on the skin. Then the Kohen shall quarantine it for a second 7-day period. The Kohen shall look at it again on the 7th day, and behold, if the affliction has dimmed, and the affliction has not spread on the skin, then the Kohen shall declare him pure. It is mispachat. He can immerse himself and he can rejoin the community. But if it spreads, again, another 7 days. So we're dealing with a situation where there are 3 dimensions that the Kohen evaluates that is going to cause you to remain outside the camp for an additional 7-day period. I'm going to show you the concept of them. And I heard this in a discussion by Rabbi Yitzchak Breidowitz from Jerusalem. Number 1, If the white hair, which is standing out, remains just as white as it did in the first 7-day period, and the Kohen does not see any diminishment, you have another 7 days. Why? Because that indicates a denial of responsibility. So the concept of this affliction appearing on my skin and be inspected, I'm declared having saras, I leave my home, I leave my family, I leave my tribe, I go out to the outskirts of the camp, I'm further away from the temple and from the pulsating heart of the Jewish people. I spend 7 days considering my position. The Kohen comes and checks me again, but there's no diminishment of whiteness in that hair. So what it means symbolically, according to the comments, is it means that you're not taking on responsibility, because the minute you start to take on responsibility, then the symptoms will fade. Another possibility is that it's spreading to a bigger area. And interestingly enough, what does this show? And we have to put these 3 pieces together. It shows despondency. Instead of saying, okay, I want to live my life a different way, I'm ready to take responsibility and I'm ready to address my shortcomings and make improvements. That's what's lacking, A or B. And then comes the third opportunity. The third opportunity is if the blemish remains the same, but it becomes clear in the middle, but it doesn't recede around that. Something exactly to that effect, and I can't visualize it so well. What does that indicate? That clarity in the middle means I am not even confronting the issue. And we see this a lot in modern people. You know, you can tell someone there's a serious problem going on here. It needs your attention. You can tell someone your child is really suffering. You need to spend more time with your child. And the parent may think of one of 3 things. Oh, I spend a lot of time with my kid. He's got to take care of himself. It's his responsibility, not mine. That's the first category. The second is, oh, what can I do? My kid is hopeless. No matter how much time I spend with him, it's not going to make a difference. And the third possibility is, don't bother me. I'm busy. I know I'm inconvenienced by leaving the camp. I know I'm inconvenienced by the fact that my kid is not flourishing. It causes me embarrassment. It means that things aren't so comfortable at home, but I just don't want to deal with it. Different than not taking responsibility. All these 3 insights is what we're meant to learn from Saras. And we're meant to learn most especially is that people are capable of growth when they take responsibility for their own growth, when they take action and don't remain simply despondent. They can look at a problem, they can accept that they have responsibility to change, and they can have hope that they're capable of change. And the third thing is they set aside the time and the effort to give it thought and consideration. Those are the 3 aspects of confronting my place in society when it gets disrupted that the Torah is teaching us in Saras. So this can become a starting point as we seek to climb this ladder of closeness to God, of gratitude to God, of pride of being Jewish, which hopefully we're going to traverse between tonight and the first night of Pesach, when we sit down with our families at a Seder table to recount the story of Egypt. We're going to recognize the fact that we want to grow towards and up to that moment. And that will give us momentum, it'll give us insight, and it'll give us access to that amazingly refreshing, renewed feeling that the Jewish people had on that very night when they walked out of Egyptian bondage, and they felt the sense of Hashem has granted me freedom, freedom to grow, freedom to draw close to God, freedom to live an important, meaningful life. So much said about this week's Torah reading. Now we're going to look at this arc from a different perspective. We're going to look at the 4 special parshiot, additional Torah readings that we make leading up to Rosh Chodesh Nisan, which really begins with a flourish, this time of redemption. This coming Shabbat is Rosh Chodesh Nisan. It's the first day of Nisan. We read this supplementary Tazria HaChodesh, but over the past few weeks, we have read the three others. So we're going to talk at all four, and we're going to look at it as an arc. What are the four? The first special reading is Shkolim, which has to do with bringing the half shekel. Now, the half shekel is read at this time of the year, because this is the time of the year when the new year for the offerings would begin, and the funds were collected by the temple. The second special portion we read is Amalek. We read that in position to Purim, because Haman is described as a descendant of Amalek. But it's also going to give us momentum leading into Pesach. Last week we read Parshat Parah with the red heifer. Again, a technical reason why we read it, because this is the time of the year when people were especially concerned about ritual purity, because you couldn't bring the Paschal lamb in the temple on the 14th of Nisan so that you could eat it that night as part of your Seder, unless you were ritually pure. And if you weren't, you had to wait a month, and then you had Pesach Sheni, and you could bring it then. Those are the technical reasons. But very interestingly, Rav Tazria HaChodesh, a very innovative thinker who lived in Krakow, was Hasidic rabbi who crossed all the lines in terms of reverence, and his writings are revered by everyone. He takes these three special weeks leading up to this coming one, and he attaches them to a Mishnah in Pirkei Avot. And the Mishnah in Pirkei Avot is in chapter 4. It's usually listed as Mishnah 21. But of course, in this art scroll, Pirkei Avot, which I really love using, it's listed as Mishnah 28. So if you're wanting to look it up, open up your Ethics of the Fathers, Pirkei Avot, turn to the 4th chapter, look somewhere between 21 and 28, depending on how they break down the Mishnahs, and you will find the following statement. Rabbi Elazar HaKapor said, jealousy, lust, and pursuit of glory remove a person from this world. Motziin et ha'adam min ha'olam. Take a person out of this world. Now, just as a baseline, this is the time of the year we want to be especially part of the world. We want to be part of reliving the Exodus from Egypt. We want to be part of experiencing anew a sense of renewal, a sense of freedom, a sense of opportunity that all that provided to our ancestors then and to us today. So in order for us to do that, we want to attach ourselves, we want to get into the world. We don't want to be sitting outside, separated from everyone else. We don't want to be isolated emotionally due to our own insecurities, due to our own jealousy, due to our own desire for honor, due to our own lust, which also isolates people from one another. We want to feel as though we're part of the world now for these next 3 weeks, so that we can experience everything every day has to offer, so that we can join with the Jewish people on the 15th of Nisan, and we can sit down at that Seder table with our families, hopefully with children, perhaps with grandchildren, depends on what stage of life we're at, and we can share this inspiration, and we can share this uplift, and we can convey to them, wow, you know what it's like to feel to be redeemed from Egypt? It's the most amazing, wonderful, special feeling that anybody could ever have. And we're so happy to be part of it. And we're brimming with the desire to share it with other people. Hold on 1 second. So therefore, we want to be part of the world. So what do we have to do? We have to look at 3 aspects of human nature that we want to mitigate during this time, because to whatever extent they are part of us, they're holding us back. They're creating a barrier between us being connected to one another, and they place a barrier between our opportunity to be close to God. So let's line this up. Parshat Shkolim, the bringing of the half shekel coin. deals with the idea of jealousy. How so? So Tazria HaChodesh says very beautifully the following idea. What am I bringing? I'm bringing only a half shekel because I realize that I'm part of a bigger picture. And when I add my half shekel to your half shekel, and each Jewish person makes that contribution, we're showing a sense of connectivity to one another. What's jealousy? Jealousy is a disconnect from one person to another. Jealousy is built on the idea, if you have it, I want it. If you have it, I deserve it more than you. Why should you be here? And jealousy causes me to feel that I'm here. And again, to use this simple matrix, the only way we can really see eye to eye and feel connected as part of one people, and the only way we could both look up together to perceive the presence of Hashem would be if I take from you to equalize things. And that's kina, it's a terrible, terrible attribute. So the shkolim, the annual giving of the shkolim is meant to drive home to us very, very deeply the sense that we are interconnected. If God has blessed you in a way that enriches you in comparison to me, as we look at the whole picture, that's an advantage for all of us. And God has a purpose in doing that. And who knows at what moment that extra wisdom you have, that extra finance that you have at your disposal, that extra counsel you can give won't benefit me. And ultimately it's good for the whole. So I see it as an enrichment of myself as well. I see my half shekel going together with everyone else's half shekel and making the Beit HaMikdash, making the Mishkan possible so that we can be connected to God. So symbolically, what that does is it tells us that you want to get ready for Pesach. In your mind, metaphorically, give that half shekel. See yourself as part of a bigger whole, and see your friend's enrichment as not something that puts you down, but that ultimately enriches the community. Let's look at the second one of Amalek. Amalek is deemed to have cooled us off, to make us less warm. Asher korcha baderech. He cooled us off. And Rav Tzadok says something very interesting. We think of lust as being in the heat of the moment, and that's true on a personal level. But the greater extent that a person is lustful and is focused on aggrandizement at satisfying my needs at all cost, the importance of other people becomes diminished. They become tools or objects for me to use for my own benefit. And again, it completely alienates any sense of unity, any sense of connection, and any sense of warmth in the sense that, oh, I feel good tonight because my friend made a wedding. And I'm so happy for him that he's reached this milestone. But instead, when my thoughts are, I need to satisfy my needs now, no matter what, even if it involves infringing or crossing certain barriers, such a person has no room to take a deep breath and to say, oh, but my next door neighbor's child got married last night. Let me go to a Sheva Brachos and sing and dance and magnify that sense of joy and happiness, because after all, it is a milestone which all of us can share together. Parshat Porah, we use the ashes of the red heifer to purify ourselves. And yes, technically we need that available to us so that we can enter the temple and bring our paschal lamb. That's the technical reason. But the real reason is for a person to come to touch the notion that, like Abraham said, Anochi ofor ve'efer, I myself am just dust and ash. To get a view of ourselves, which is not that I deserve honor. After all, the third aspect of life that Rebbe Elazar HaKapor teaches us is such a diminishment, it takes us out of the world, in a sense that I need you to honor me. I need you to stop and recognize my importance. Again, to use our simple matrix, I need you to artificially boost me up by giving me some honor, by acting in a way which says, oh, you know, I'm ready to serve you. Whatever the idea of kavod is, it's a full sense of growing, and it's an attitude of growing which can only be rectified by a person feeling as though we're all human beings. And ultimately, as the lesson of Lashon Hara teaches us, if I want to speak badly about you, I can do so easily because you have plenty of faults. But I also recognize the idea that I also have my faults. So if right now I'm the guy who hit the home run in the 9th inning and we win the game and everybody's carrying me on their shoulders, I know that there's going to be games when I'm going to strike out with the bases loaded, and maybe you'll come up next and you'll hit the home run. So instead of me feeling full of myself and therefore seeing everyone else's faults while I'm pretending my own have disappeared, which is a true sense of arrogance, instead of that, what I can do is I can rather push aside any sense of kavod, any sense of wanting to feel more grand than everyone else, any sense of arrogance that comes from that, and rather see myself as we're all ultimately dust and ashes. We all share humanity. We all have weaknesses. We all have vulnerabilities. We all have moments where we shine. Let's look at life through those eyes, and let's make sure we boost everyone up together. And this arc, Rav Tzadok tells us, if we, in an orderly way, pay attention to these ideas over the coming 3 weeks as we get ready to celebrate Pesach, we will be in this world. We will be far more connected to the going out of Egypt. And now I just want to add an important thought which underlines and underpins all of this, and that is this. What do we ultimately take away from the enslavement in Egypt and our freedom? It goes back in Genesis to where God predicted to Abraham, Yodoya Teda ki ger yeh zarachem ba'aretz shelo. You should know that your descendants will go through a period of harsh enslavement where everyone will be reduced through suffering and through deprivation to a very base level of existence. And that will be a point in time when the Jewish people can look each other in the face and feel a sense of responsibility to one another, a sense of connection to one another. And then those will be the descendants, Abraham, of yours that will go out of Egypt and will be redeemed. And hence we even mention in the Haggadah the fact that Chamushim Yatsu, that according to Midrashim, only 20% of the Jews who experienced the enslavement of Egypt reached the level of connection to one another, reached the level of understanding that I need to overcome my jealousy, I need to overcome my desire for self-fulfillment and my lust. I need to overcome my desire to be singled out and honored by others. And in doing so, I really become part of this world and all of life's experiences. And then I'm ready to experience the redemption from Egypt. I'm ready to go free, and I'm ready to launch the Jewish people in its trajectory of being the chosen people of the world. And as I cross these milestones in preparation, and as I approach Pesach in this manner, then it's HaChodesh Hazel Lochem L'Rosh Chodeshim. It's a new moment. That new moon that appears on Rosh Chodesh Nisan really is a magical thin line of entering a much deeper connection with one another, a much deeper sense of responsibility for one another, and a much greater readiness to connect with Hashem and be God's people. And that launched us in almost 1,000 years of development in the land of Israel, ended with the destruction of the first temple because we worshiped idols, we turned our back on God, and we celebrated the misfortune of our neighbor. We lost that thread and we lost that trajectory. And hence we were sent out of the land of Israel. We were brought back for the second temple period of 420 years. We rebuilt ourselves, but unfortunately, we've spent the last 2,000 years next year in Jerusalem. Let's climb this ladder. Let's follow this arc toward freedom, and let's really achieve everything that God intended when God redeemed our ancestors from Egypt, to the extent that we not only remember it, but that we feel it and we experience it. And the way we experience it is sitting at that Seder table, filled with gratitude, filled with appreciation, filled with love for our fellow Jew, called Dichvin Yovo V'yechol. Whoever is hungry, please come in, join me, because I've learned this lesson appropriately. And even if I only have a few meager matzahs on the table, I'm happy to share them with you, because I know where they come from, and I know who replenishes my supply. And I know that in not overly hoarding things for myself, and not seeking to build myself up at the expense of others, and not looking to lord it over others, I know that those are the expectations that God has for me and for the Jewish people, so that we can fulfill everything, every aspiration that Abraham established for us when he recognized God, left his homeland, traveled to the land of Canaan, and devoted his every energy to creating a Jewish future for the world. We can make that happen this year as well if we just keep these milestones in front of us and we walk this path together, growing day by day, week by week for these coming 3 weeks. We could really celebrate an extraordinary Pesach together. We'll meet again next week, but everyone let's buckle up, let's traverse this territory, and let's really prepare ourselves for redemption. Happy to answer any questions if there are any.
Say, Rabbi, I may have just missed your saying it, but what is the fourth special parsha that will be read?
HaChodesh, we're declaring the new moon, where we, the Jewish people, are entrusted by God to start measuring time. We declare when Rosh Chodesh is. And so we declare when these lines of demarcation take place. We declare when we see the new moon, this coming new moon, this Shabbos, that this is the first day of Nisan, and therefore 2 weeks from today is going to be the first day of Pesach. We're setting the calendar, and we have the privilege of doing so because we've earned that place in God's creation.
And does that fourth parsha refer back to the Pirkei Avos, the fourth chapter?
No, we just get there through the three, through the three that lead up to it.
All right, well, thank you.
Thank you. Any other questions? I want to thank you for joining me. Everyone should have a great night, and we'll pursue some other ideas in preparation for Pesach next week, and hopefully we'll even be able to get a class in just a few days before Pesach, a week from that. Everyone should have a great evening. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.
Good night.